Hi everybody, my name is John Feeney, and in this session I'm going to talk about AI coding assistants, and in particular how some organizations are unlocking the full potential of their coding assistants and how they do that. So to begin, I think it's, I just want to say a few words about AI. I think it's safe to say that AI is really transforming the way we work in the world of software development, whether you're an experienced software developer looking for ways to accelerate your work, or maybe you're less experienced and you're looking for guidance and assistance on a solution design. AI is really revolutionizing the way we approach our work and the way we think about it. And the benefits and the use cases, they're well documented. I think they're well understood at this point. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But I just want to focus on maybe an area where maybe some folks are not realizing the full benefits of AI. And one thing that I want to kind of zero in on is an interesting finding from a recent survey from Carnegie Mellon University. They, as part of this survey, they reached out to a whole bunch of software developers that they knew were using an AI coding assistant of some sort. And they asked them what their thoughts were, and so on. And what was interesting was, for those that were no longer using an AI coding assistant, they asked them, well, what are the reasons for that? Why are you no longer using AI? And the number one response to that question was, the model just does not provide helpful suggestions. Now, that's pretty interesting. And you might ask, well, what does that mean? What do we mean when we say a suggestion is not helpful? Well, it can mean a lot of different things depending on who you talk to, and it can differ from organization to organization. It could mean that the suggested code is just not meeting the functional or non-functional requirements of the system or the team or even the organization itself. It could also mean that maybe the suggestions are just not in line with our guidelines or with our standard practices. It could mean that maybe the suggestions contain errors. Maybe the assistant is not taking a broad enough view of our application landscape, and so the code is not compiling. Maybe the information's out of date, right? This is actually a common criticism of models. They are trained at a point in time, and they're not always aware of the latest software library versions. Okay, so there's a lot of reasons as to why somebody might perceive a code suggestion as being unhelpful. What I'm going to talk about over these next few slides is how some organizations are addressing these concerns. And if I was to sum that up in like one word, that word would be context. Context is all important when it comes to AI, and to really understand that importance, it's worthwhile to kind of maybe just step back and think about models and the way they work. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but very briefly, modern day LLMs, they are neural networks. They reason about sequences of data and the relationships between entities within those sequences, and that makes them very, very good at predicting what comes next in a sequence of characters or words. So in this oversimplified example that you see on the screen, you can see that context is really, really important, and it really informs what the output or the response from the model is going to be. So the goal is to really ensure that the context is of the highest possible quality to ensure that we have the best possible response from the model. Now, AI coding assistants, they use models, LLMs, that have been trained on millions upon millions of open source repos. Okay, and they've also been highly specialized to deal with coding tasks, and so they lend themselves very, very well to common coding problems, and they can deliver value pretty much out of the box. I mean, you can straight away ask an AI to help you parse a CSV file, to validate some inputs, create a sorting operation for you, help you write a React application from scratch, and so on. But as things become more complicated, as we get into more kind of enterprise situations, that's where they begin to struggle. So, for example, maybe you're working on a long-lived project. Maybe it's years old or even decades old. Maybe there are lots of interdependencies with other systems. And so that's where some AI coding assistants start to fall down. Okay, so to give you a practical example of what I'm talking about, here we're going to ask the assistant, how do we make a call to the services layer within our organization? Now, with little in the way of context, the assistant and the model is going to attempt to answer this question using the open source software upon which it's been trained. But of course, that's going to lead to a very generic response, something that's really not going to be relevant and something that we just won't be able to use. So what you want to do instead is you want to have the assistant to look at your domain, right? So here we're ensuring that it has workspace visibility is turned on. In Tabnine, we call this workspace indexing. And we ask the very same question again. And by having the assistant look across our software domain, it'll be able to pull out code or patterns, if they exist, that answer this particular question or problem. And so here you can see we have a different response, and this code here has originated from our own code base. And down at the bottom, the assistant will tell you as well where it obtained this code. So you can open up the file in your IDE. It will highlight the function from which that code suggestion was derived. So it helps you to also navigate your own code base quite easily. So this is all thanks to a mechanism called Retrieval Augmented Generation. And it's a very powerful way of enriching the context that the model uses to answer questions from the user. And this is a very simplified view of the whole thing, but the point here is that we obtain the most closely related documents to the question or the task at hand. And these are obviously, this is data that the model did not have access to at the time of training. And it is provided to the model to provide a correct and appropriate response to the user. Where do we get these documents from? Well, in the world of AI coding assistants, these are, for the most part, code-related files, right? So classes, modules, JSON files, you name it. And they can be obtained from a variety of different sources. So the most obvious one is from the user's local environment, right? So they have cloned all of these repos locally. They have a wealth of code, and much of it is very much pertinent and related to the work they're doing. So it's a very good source of context and data. You can also connect your code repositories to the assistant as well. These are an important source of context. Many organizations do this because over time they have built large repositories of code, many of them decades in the making. And some organizations find that their developer community, some of the developers are rewriting the same code again and again. And so in an effort to encourage reuse of code and to facilitate discoverability of that code, they choose to connect these repos to the assistant. There are many other reasons for doing this as well. I mean, over time, you may have a collection of highly curated best practices and accredited patterns for solving domain-specific problems, and you may want to expose those as code suggestions to your developers. So that's a very good reason to do this as well. You may want to lessen the learning curve for new team members and folks who are onboarding to projects for the first time. Or, I've seen situations as well where some organizations have very large teams that are geographically dispersed and they're not immediately aware of the work that each other is doing. And so by connecting these repos to the assistant, that helps to mitigate against that. So lots of great reasons as to why you would want to connect these repos to the assistant. But it's very important that when you do this, that you introduce code that is of high quality, because what you get out of the model is only as good as what you put into it. And so, you want to make sure that if there's any undesirable code in there, any legacy code, that you want to strip that out before you introduce it. And then you have non-code sources of information as well that you can connect to the assistant. And these provide invaluable sources of data and context. So for example, you maybe in Confluence or SharePoint, you may have you might be documenting your applications or your systems and outlining the functional and non-functional requirements of those systems. And so that's really important context as well. And maybe you're using Jira or some other planning or a project and portfolio management system. And, with most organizations, work begins with a change description of some sort in a ticket or an issue. So this is really important context as well. And, using a combination of all of these things here actually works quite effectively. So, in this example here, you can see where we're connecting the assistant to a Jira ticket that describes the change that we want to implement. And by marrying that context and that change description with the code that we have in the project that we're working on, this together really can form a very comprehensive and robust solution to the requirement or to the problem. Now, another approach that you can take to ensure that this code suggestions being provided to the end users are as helpful as possible is through the introduction of rules. And so these rules can come in a variety of different forms. Again, you could have a wiki page that outlines all of the different rules that you expect that must be obeyed when it comes to writing code for your organization. You might have some code style guides that you're using for different languages. You may even have past code reviews where there have been very valuable comments and guidelines. All of these things can really be used to provide rules to the assistant. And what will happen is the assistant will include these as part of the context. And these will be used, in real time when providing code suggestions to the user within the IDE. So they act as like a set of guardrails for the code suggestions that are provided to the users. And it also allows the assistant to also participate as a code reviewer within pull requests and merge requests. And so, the assistant can look at the changes being proposed and then by referencing the rules that you've provided, be able to provide remediation advice for these violations. So very, very powerful stuff. Now, looking beyond context, we have the option of fine-tuning. And this is something that some organizations choose to embark on. And we see it most commonly where there are certain languages being used, niche languages, what I would call possibly legacy languages, maybe even domain-specific languages. But ultimately, these are languages where there aren't a lot of open source examples out there for. And the idea here is that we take a pre-trained model. We want to retain as much of the capabilities that the model picked up during pre-training, and we're targeting layers in that model so that it becomes better at a certain task or language. Again, the same rules apply in terms of like data in, data out. When you're fine-tuning the model, you want to make sure that the data, the code that you're introducing is free of any anti-patterns or undesirable code, that it's of high quality. So that's another option. And this rounds out then the various steps or options that organizations pursue in terms of trying to deliver a highly personalized experience to their developers. So we call this the 4 C's. These are 4 stepping stones. Context is, again, what we see in the user's local environment. connection is, introducing these repos to the assistant. Coaching is providing rules-based guidance to the assistant. And finally, we have customization, which speaks about fine-tuning. Some organizations are further along in this journey than others, but ultimately here you have all the tools to ensure that your developers are receiving the most relevant and helpful suggestions possible and providing full value. Okay, that brings me to an end. I hope you found this session informative, and I hope it's given you some ideas. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please do get in touch with us. We'd love to speak with you. If you want to talk to us about how we can help with the privacy of your data, or how we can provide a highly personalized experience for your teams, let us know. We'd love to pick up the conversation with you. Okay, thank you and enjoy the rest of the event.